Good afternoon or evening, depending upon where in the world you're joining us from. Thank you so much for joining us for episode 2 of season 2 of Valley Society's Black Writers Read. My name is Nicole M. Young Martin, and I serve as the producer and host for this series. And I'm coming to you from my home office in Northern Connecticut. Given that we're still operating in the pandemic, you'll probably see or hear a lot of things, including family members walking by, pets going off. We're getting ready for Christmas, so there's decorations everywhere. So, welcome to my home. Valley Society is a writing and social group for Black writers located in the Connecticut River Valley of Western Massachusetts. One of our programs is Black Writers Read, which showcases, celebrates, and honors the words, work, and traditions of Black writers from across the country, across genres, across experiences, and across the African diaspora. Since starting the series during the summer of 2020, we've hosted over 25 writers of different genres, including children's book authors, poets, young adult fiction writers, essayists from California, upstate New York, greater Boston, and in our own backyard. Today, we're hosting our first ever cookbook author. Joining us from Lisbon, Portugal, which is why I said at the beginning, welcome at whatever time zone you're joining us from, because today's author is 5 hours ahead. She is at 6 p.m. We're here 1 p.m. Eastern time. Joining us from Lisbon, Portugal is Margo Gabriel. She was one of the authors who read during our Black History Month event earlier this year. So some of you have heard her work already who are familiar with the show. For this episode, Margo will share with us the opening essay from her debut cookbook, The Expat Kitchen, which was released earlier this fall. Margo is a freelance writer who writes on a host of topics, including food, culture, lifestyle, self-help, travel, wine, music, and art. Her words have been published in a myriad of magazines. She's living the dream. I'm like, Margo, I want to live your life. Has been published in Boston Art Review, Cuisine Noir, Edible Boston, Fordor's Travel, and Solstice Literary Magazine. And she has been featured in the New York Times, Huffington Post, and Salon. For those who are new to Black Writers Read, here's the format of our show. First, Margo will share an excerpt of her work. Afterwards, we'll engage in conversation, and then we'll open it up to Q&A to all of our viewers. We have viewers joining us from both Facebook and YouTube today. If you have a question, please feel free to include it in the comment section on the platform where you're joining us from today. I will, during the process, compile the questions and pose them to Margo following our conversation. So please help me in welcoming to the virtual stage, Miss Margo Gabriel. Hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Good, good, good. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited.
I am so excited too. I've been following you since you joined us in February. Opal Gale, who is one of the members of Valley Society,
Yeah.
highly praises your work.
Oh
I
man, thank you,
admire,
Opal.
yeah, I admire the career that you've carved for yourself. I feel like I can learn a lot from you. And I think our readers can learn, our viewers, and hopefully people who read Black authors will learn a lot from you as well. It also means
Awesome,
a
thank
lot
you.
that you're joining us today from as expansive of a time zone, because there's like a 5 hour
Mhm.
time zone difference. So how's the weather where you are?
So technically, it's winter here in Portugal. Well, autumn. So typically, it's like low 60s, high 50s during the day. It's sunny, which is really nice. And at night, it usually gets a little windy and around like high 40s, low 50s. So it's coming from Boston. I don't mind it. I actually really enjoy the cool weather. But during the spring and summer, it's really the best season to be in Lisbon. There's hardly any humidity. There's like over I think 300 days of sun here that you can experience in Portugal. So it's not a bad gig. I have no complaints. But yeah, right now it's like in the low 50s.
Nice. I'm
Yeah.
like, can you like package some of that and send it here? Because here, well, today it's not that bad. It's like in the 40s, but
Good.
at night
Good.
it's like frost and stuff. So it's not too bad
Okay.
here.
Okay.
So I will go ahead and turn it over to Margo.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. So I'm going to read the opening essay. It's really the only essay in my cookbook, and it's titled "Where Food, Culture, and People Meet." Before we dive into the recipes, I want to share that the idea of this book was birthed well before I moved halfway across the world to Portugal. When I was a kid, I was fascinated by the way a writer could bend language and create a world that a reader like me could inhabit. Through books, I immersed myself in places different from my own. Like those writers that caught my attention so many years ago, I knew I wanted to one day write a book of my own. I'm grateful food and storytelling have introduced me to cuisines and cultures different from my own experience. This book is an ode to those who revel in their curiosity, who push past their comfort zone and love a great meal. My hope is that the recipes in this book will be a springboard for your passion projects that will feed your creative spirit. The theme, where food, people, and culture meet, is a philosophy I live by, no matter where I am in the world. This is what keeps me curious. I'll always find a simple restaurant, interesting people to connect to, and great live music performances. Each of the recipes remind me of a travel experience, the people I've met, and the incredible food I've had along the way. These recipes have helped me to create new memories of connection, joy, and laughter. I hope they do the same for you. Bon appetit. So that's nice and short. um, and part of the title of the book, The Expat Kitchen, is where food, culture, and people meet. So I figured I'd merge all of my thoughts around that in this opening essay.
Yay, thank you so much for sharing the opening essay. We have so much to talk about.
Yes.
Yes, oh yes, we do. Let's get ready. Audience, join us for this ride. So you have a very expansive career. Margo, can you offer us a brief snapshot into the journey to now? How did you become a
Sure.
freelance writer?
Sure. So my degree is in English and professional writing. So from very early on as a kid, I was what you would sort of describe as a bookworm, and just was always fascinated by language. So I knew I was going to study English or be in that space at some point in the future. Growing up, so was bent on studying English. Did that and graduated in 2009 from the University of Massachusetts in Boston, and graduated into a recession. And so I was pretty much at a scramble, like to find work, and I ended up in the world of numbers. I did accounting, I did bookkeeping. I did not enjoy it, but it paid the bills. So for much of my adult working life, I was either doing accounting or bookkeeping or doing something in finance. And about 4 years ago, I started freelance writing part time. Initially, I was just pretty much writing for free because I really wanted to get back into writing. Um, Before, when I was working full time, I just didn't have like the time, the space, the mental energy to really focus on writing. And so, in talking with one of my siblings, my younger brother, he was like, just start a blog, like just start documenting, the trips that you take. So during my time working in accounting, I would always go on vacation to different places. At that point, this is like 2000, I'd say 12. So I
Mhm.
was going to California, or I was always going to New York because it was very close to Boston, or different parts of the state, the U.S. And then in 2017 was my first trip to Europe. I went to London, and loved it. Um, and so thinking about my brother's suggestion, I decided to start a blog, Margo's Creative Life,
Mm.
and then got on Instagram and would sometimes share places that I'd been to. And then in maybe 2018, 2019, I sent a cold email to the editor at Cuisine Noir. And she responded and she was like, let's hop on a call. And I was like, oh my God, this is like really happening. Because at that point, I didn't feel like a writer, if
Mm.
that makes sense, because I spent so much of the last 8 years just working in accounting, and I didn't really have writer friends, and I wasn't I wasn't part of Grub Street or any of the Facebook groups, so I really didn't know where to begin, and who to ask about rates and things like that. So
Mm.
whenever I did, pitch to a place, I would not negotiate the rate, or I would just get paid pennies. And I was like, oh my God, they published my stuff. This is exciting. And so, now I realize how important community is, and how invaluable like spaces like, Black Writers Reads really truly is. So I wish I could have told that to my younger self, starting out, but you learn as you go along. So I'd say in the last like 4 years, I really started focusing on pitching. For me, that was such a new concept. And like when I graduated, I wasn't really thinking about food writing. I was thinking maybe I'd go into technical writing, but again, didn't really develop any like connections to get beyond like whatever I was thinking about. So I figured, you know what, I'll work on my blog. I'll start interviewing people who say yes. So my first official like guest on my personal blog was a food stylist and chef out of Boston, Chef Elle Simone Scott, and like she's amazing. The fact that she agreed to have me interview her, so I found another creative in the city of Boston to help document this interview, and that was really my first official clip that I could then share with editors who would say, well, you don't have any clips, like who have you interviewed? So I really had to think about how I was going to build out my portfolio if I hadn't really written anything in the last 8-9 years. So really had to step outside of my comfort zone in that regard, and be okay with rejection, because there was a lot of that. There was a lot of that. And even like now I think about like my earlier writing, I'm like, wow, somebody paid me to write this. That's crazy. It's just like so cringe. But hey, you got to keep writing to become a better writer. So, but yeah, I went from finance into part-time freelance writing. And then with the pandemic, I ended up I was laid off from my job. And so I was like, okay, this is an opportunity, like literally right before COVID in February of 2020. So since April of 2020, I was like, I have to do freelancing because I'm not going to go back into the office. At that point, we didn't know what this COVID thing really was, and there wasn't a vaccine on the market. So I really had to get creative, and I had to lean into like my network of friends, and started utilizing Grub Street, joined all the Facebook groups, became connected to Black Writers Read, and really started utilizing LinkedIn to say like, hey, I'm open for work, or networking with other writers, and just being more open and like letting people know like, hey, this is what I'm working on, or if you know of anyone that's looking to bring on a freelancer, let me know. So that's sort of like the long and short of it.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. I so didn't realize you had a whole other career and a whole other life before. Because I thought it was something you've been developing your whole time.
I feel very new, like still, even though it's been a couple of years, I feel very, very new to like the writing space, the writing world, specifically food writing.
Wow. So that takes us to our next question.
Sure.
What inspired you to write about food? And do you remember the first dish and experience you had that called you to do this type of writing?
Oh, that's a great question. I will say I love to eat. I'll preface. I really do love to eat. And for me, like I feel like learning about a culture is easiest for me if I'm like, trying the foods and the different wines and things like that. So that's, I feel like, has always been who I am. And in the Haitian culture, food is very important. It's, Haitian, and also like we're very hospitable people. So I remember like growing up seeing my mom cook large meals, and I wasn't really into cooking, but I'm glad I learned when I was younger, because it's really benefited me now as I've gotten older. But I would say just always being curious about like, oh, well, what's this flavor in this dish, or how does this remind me of Haitian, a Haitian dish that I'm fond of. And then too, traveling is like another gateway to expose me to different people, cultures, music, even. Um, I'll say, I love Italian food. I also love French food.
Nice.
So any opportunity I can get to try a new restaurant or um, a new dish, like I'm all open for it. So I don't
Yeah.
have like a specific memory of like the one dish. I have like a list of restaurants that I absolutely love going to, and I'm a little sad that I'm like, here in Portugal that I can't, just like hop on the bus or whatever and go into, Boston and like try out some of my favorite restaurants, but that's okay.
Yeah, what is your favorite restaurant in the Boston area? I'm curious.
I have a few. So, my favorite Italian restaurant in Boston is Mita. It's in the South End. They just opened a second location in the Newton neighborhood. So, if you are
Oh.
ever in Boston, go visit Mita. Everything on the menu is amazing.
Yeah.
And then another favorite is Franklin Cafe, which is, I want to say that's in the South End. That's like just classic American staples. Really,
Oh,
really excellent food, just super chill. Um, those are the two that come to mind. Yeah.
nice. I love those recommendations. And Boston is like one of my favorite cities because it's so walkable and there's like so much
Yes.
like
Yeah.
the restaurant scene, the art scene there, the theater
Oh my,
scene.
across the board, it's such a great city, minus the snow. I'd
But
say like
yes.
like I love the first snowfall and then I'm done. I'm like, no.
Yes. That
But
is
yeah.
the snowfall. So since you are from originally from the US and you're now in Portugal, and we have some questions coming up, because I did see one in the chat that
Okay.
wants to understand your journey, your move. What does it mean to write as a Black expat? And there's some really famous
Sure.
Black expats in our culture, including James Baldwin, Josephine Baker. There's just so many.
Right.
Um, what does it mean to be a Black expat, and how does this newer identity inform your work?
I love these questions. So for me, like moving here, I realized, yes, I definitely have a level of privilege
Mm,
as an American. Um, and that's been a little interesting, sort of grappling with, knowing that like Portugal's past and just how some uh, of the diaspora are treated.
mhm,
And I would say are considered marginalized communities in Portugal. Um, so that is really dicey. I don't know if that's the right word. That's been
mhm,
really interesting trying to grapple with that. So for me, in my way in coping with that is like I want to tell stories around the diaspora, around the African business owners that have moved here
mm,
and have been here since their teens and really have worked hard to establish themselves. So I feel like that's like my contribution to being a new person in this space in this country
mm,
because I do want to learn about the culture. I don't know too much about Portugal aside from what I've learned in history books growing up in the States. Um, so yeah, I would say like the work that I'm doing now, interviewing chefs, interviewing winemakers, people in
mm,
the cultural space here, musicians and such. I feel like that's sort of the work
mm,
that I find is important. And not like I don't want to just like be here and I don't know, take up space in a way that is like, oh wow, I'm American, if that makes sense. Like I really
mm.
want to, honor the fact that I'm an outsider and
Yeah.
um and learn about the different peoples that are here from whether they're from Sao Tome or Guinea-Bissau, Mozambique, Angola, Cape Verde, or some of the former colonies. So for
Mhm,
me, it's a lot of like listening and like learning about their stories, learning about their experiences, what brought them here. Because I find that people will ask me like, "Well, why are you here? Like, you don't speak the language, and you don't really have a connection to Portugal." And I was like, "Those are all very good questions and very true." So I find that documenting like the different individuals that I've met here is like my contribution, I'll say.
Nice. So you're in Lisbon after spending
Yeah,
some time in Boston, and I
yeah,
think you were born in Miami, and you're
yep,
of Haitian American heritage. What prompted your move to Lisbon, and why specifically did you choose Portugal?
sure. So I came to Portugal in 2018 on vacation and really was never on my radar. And I was like pleasantly surprised. I love the architecture, the food, the people seemed really nice. And so I said, you know what, I'll come back here.
Mm,
And so my goal was to actually come back December 2020. This was before COVID, and I was like, okay, this is a lot. So since my first visit here in 2018, it was really
mm,
on my mind, and I was like, how can I live abroad and like really make this happen? And when I worked in my previous job, we had pretty good vacation like opportunities, and so
mm,
the goal was to take the whole month of December off and live remotely, work remotely, or just take my vacation and just live, for the month of December in Portugal. And then, of course, COVID happened. So we were all stuck at home. I was feeling really sorry for myself. And so I ended up, you know, uh, moving in, when was it? Applying for a visa in July, August, and then COVID really slowed everything down because the world folks just didn't know what they were doing.
mhm.
And so I ended up finally arriving in Portugal in October after getting all my paperwork together. And I still didn't believe it because I was like, this is really happening. This is kind of insane. So, my family was like, what are you doing? Why are you moving? This is a lot. And I was like, don't worry. If I hate it, I'll just come back. I knew I wasn't going to hate my experience
Right.
here. But, with COVID being like another layer, I wasn't really sure what to expect. And again, I didn't really know anyone here. So I was just like, okay.
Mm,
I like to challenge myself. And honestly, I'm really glad I made the move because just the caliber of people that I've met here, the
mm,
opportunities that I've had, it's really remarkable. Like I'm so grateful. Some days I'm just like, whoa, this is really, this is really life. This is crazy. So very, very grateful. And I always just tell people, like, honestly, you just have to push yourself beyond your comfort zone because you just have to. I don't know. I just feel like,
mhm.
now that I'm not working my previous job and I'm here, and maybe if I hadn't gotten laid off, like, I don't know, I just think like this life is so rich and
Mm,
it's so, so important to really like figure out what you want to do, but also like know the potential of like a new experience. And yeah, super, super grateful.
mm. Yeah, I love that you're such a risk taker. Again, I have a lot to learn from you because I am risk averse. I'm like, can I
Okay.
move across the pond? I really want to, and there's a lot of countries that I would love to visit.
Yeah.
Portugal being one of them.
Yeah. And honestly, I always tell people like it doesn't have to be a full year. It could be 10 days, it could be 2 weeks. Like, really I always tell people like know what your limitations are
Mm,
and go from there. Like know what experience you will need to be the most comfortable and then go from there. Um because I don't know, you don't have to like up and leave and just like go for a year. But again, a
mm.
year goes by really, really fast. Like we're coming up on 2022, which is really crazy to think, um, which is nuts. But yeah, so I say go for it if you can, even if it's
Nice.
for a week.
I do need, oh my God, there's so many places I want to visit. I should do like an entire, like just like vlog of, hey, Nicole wants to travel. These are some places I want to go. Anybody have couches for me to sleep on?
Hey, couch serving is a thing. And honestly, there was one program, I'll have to send it to you when we're done. I think it's called something like roofers, but basically you could work on a vineyard or on a farm anywhere in the world. And so that was one of the things I was thinking about doing because I want to learn more about wine as a food writer. And there are so many farms in Portugal. I mean, really all over the world, but the weather is very favorable here. And I was like, you know what, this will be a great opportunity, to learn the language, learn about the wine culture here and all that good stuff. So there are definitely ways around, making it work.
Yes, that is so
Yeah,
encouraging. So, how is it as a Black Haitian American woman in the 21st century, which is a very intersecting, diverse identity,
sure.
to be situated abroad while fostering a global readership in the virtual sphere, especially as a freelance writer? So, what are some possibilities and limitations associated with crafting this very unique identity?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I will say like it's so important to like really believe in yourself, really believe in like your skill set. Um, I mean, there are definitely days where I'm like, what am I doing?
Mhm.
Or I feel like I'm not like the best writer or my writing could be, improved or whatever. Um, but I often think about the sacrifice that my parents made to like leave Haiti to come to the United States, not knowing the language, really not having like a community or their immediate family. I'll say, I mean, there's Haitian people are everywhere, but
Mhm.
like to me, that's such a scary idea. But they did it, and like I was just journaling the other day and thinking about this idea of reinvention. Like my parents really didn't have the luxury of reinvention. Like they were leaving
Mm.
because they really had to for their livelihood for, you know, my siblings and myself. And like now, like as a freelance writer living in Europe, being of Haitian descent, like that to me is really powerful. And like
Mhm.
so for me, this idea of having the luxury of reinvention is really interesting. And so I want kids from Boston, from Miami to be like, "Oh, absolutely, like I want to pursue, a creative career." Like I remember trying to explain to my mom like I want to study English and she was like, "What? You already speak the language. What are you talking about?" So I just think it's funny now that like this is really the life that I'm living. But
Mhm.
it's really because of my parents and like just the fearlessness that they had in like coming to the United States and allowing my siblings and myself to have this life. So for me, it's like, why not? Why, like, I can totally do this. Even when I sort of have bouts of imposter syndrome, I'm like,
Mm.
they did so much. Like, you can totally tackle this. So, so those are the reminders I share with, for myself.
Wow. Again, all these gems that I am learning today from you. So, when writing about food specifically, how do identity, culture, and your love of travel show up in your work?
Definitely. Um, I'll say like whenever I begin writing about a particular story, whether it's, interviewing a restaurant owner here, I want to think about, what inspired them to start the business or, what was it because they just wanted to do their own thing or whatnot. So I try to figure out what the patterns are,
Mm.
um, aside from just, you know, sharing facts about like they got to Portugal in 1968 or whatever. Like I really want it to be like a I don't know, like they've met the person already, like they know this person. So that's sort of the way I want my writing to sound.
Mhm.
After someone's read an article about whoever it is I'm actually writing about. So I really spend time thinking about the person and like their ambitions and like their motivations and whatever sort of anything else that happened in between that time of them starting their business or anyone that supported them. Like obviously people are reading less and less, so
Mhm.
you can't write, a long, profile of somebody. But I really try to do justice to that person's story by honoring, like, what motivated them. And so, yeah, I hope that answered the question.
Yes, that is
um,
perfect. Yeah.
and also, I always have a playlist going, like if I'm writing or if like Spotify, I have like a ton of different, like whether it's jazz or Afro beats or pop or something like that. So I usually have like my writing playlist in the background, or I'm always like trying to discover new stuff.
Yeah, so this takes us into our next question, because for those who are familiar with the Expat Kitchen, not only does Margot do recommendations for wine pairings with the meals, but she also has a music playlist, which I'm really excited about because music is a very salient part of my identity as well. Can you
Cool.
share the developmental process behind the Expat Kitchen, which is your cookbook? And I'm definitely most interested in what first inspired you to write this cookbook, how you curated the recipes, and definitely the music playlist that's included in the book.
Definitely. So yes, music is definitely a big part of my life as well. So when I first got here, I only knew a handful of people, and my editor was like, "Oh, well, maybe you should reach out to this other person that has been in Portugal for a year. She's also an American expat
Mm.
who was living in Lisbon at the time." So I reached out, and we became fast friends. And then little by little, my circle of friends started to grow. And really what brought us together was food. Before
Mm.
the like major lockdown in Lisbon, we would go out for drinks and dinner and things like that. And then I would just have them over at my place for snacks and kickbacks and things like that. So it really just started from there. Like in January of this year, my friend Sin was like, "You should write a book." And I was like, "Oh,
Mm.
okay, that's a good idea." So then I actually started writing down the recipes. And then I would like experiment with different things, and I would share that on my social media. And like
Mm.
the funny thing about the whole process was like when I lived in the States, I rarely had time to cook or to really experiment with different like ingredients. So with the lockdown here, like all I had was time, and the
Mm.
markets are just filled with really fresh produce, and it's all locally sourced, and it's so inexpensive. So I really, had a lot of things to work with. So then I just got into the kitchen and I just started cooking. And then I'd like
Nice.
call my friends and like, "Hey, I've got leftovers." And most of the apartments in Europe are small. So like my fridge was like a mini fridge. So there was like I always had leftovers, and I'd be like, "Come through, please." So that's really how it started, was just like having my friends over for dinner and experimenting with different things and like learning different recipes that I didn't grow up eating. Like, growing up in a Haitian household, we only ate Haitian food. So learning how to make buttermilk biscuits was like so much fun, and like just different things that I would only, order if I were at a restaurant. So that was really cool. So that's really how the book idea sort of came about. And then, again, work leaning into my network, asking friends like, "Hey, do you know a web designer?" So I started working
Mm.
with my friend Rika, who did the Expat Kitchen website. And then another local friend here, Jean, she did the photography for the book. And then I just started working on the playlist. So anytime I would have my friends over, I would have my playlist going. And yeah, it's I feel like it's just really been a team effort. And someone saying, "Oh, what about this recipe?" or "Have you tried this?" So it's been a really nice experience. And then again, going back to my editor at Cuisine Noir, I was like, "Hey, do you know anyone that's really into wine?" Because
Oh.
I'm new to it. I'm not a wine connoisseur. And so she recommended, a wonderful sommelier in Virginia. I want to say her name is Benita Johnson.
Wow.
So she was really nice enough to test the recipes and then pair a wine with it,
Oh.
which I was like grateful for, because everything tastes good to me. But like she's got a very trained palate. So it worked
Nice.
out. It worked out. And then I just started really working on the playlist um, based on of the different recipes. So like if I wanted something low key or jazz, and merged all those two together.
Nice. And why was it important for you to include music in the Expat Kitchen? You talked a little bit about like how like
Yeah.
you listen to music while you're writing and things like that.
For me, I feel like it really sets the tone for whether it's a lunch or dinner. And because like because I can't physically be there to like cook with, my family or my friends back home, I feel like this is like another way to connect with them, even though I'm not like physically there. And that was like the motivation behind creating the playlist.
Nice. If you were hosting friends for a dinner party who are visiting your home for the first time,
Hmm.
which meal, wine, and song pairing from the Expat Kitchen would you share with them and why?
Okay. Oh man, that's a really good question. This is a tough one. I would say, hmm. Oh man, that's so hard. I would say the salmon dish is like my go-to. It's the spicy soy salmon with the coconut infused jasmine rice.
Oh,
It is like such a nice balance of sweet, savory, with the coconut milk, jasmine rice. Like it's so good. And then like the salmon comes out really tender because you let it marinate in the soy sauce and the oyster sauce,
oh,
and uh, it's like I've done that meal so many times for friends, and like they really
oh,
love it. So I would have that. And then I love Vino Verde, which is Portugal's like green wine, I guess it would be the translation. It's like a
nice.
really crisp white wine, really fantastic. So I'd pair those two. And then let's see. I really love Roy Hargrove. He's a trumpet player. He's since passed
Oh
away.
yeah, you said yeah.
So like his song, what's it called? I think it's no, Saint Denis is the song I
Yes, I
think it's
know
called.
that one. Yep, Saint Denis.
That
Yep.
is my favorite song. Like the guy was a
Wow.
genius. So that would be like setting the mood.
Nice.
Yeah. And I find that that's like a pretty straightforward recipe to make if you're like a novice in the kitchen, um and it's just a really nice balance. So like my friends always love when I make that
Oh, it sounds so good. Oh my gosh. And I just
dish.
recently bought the cookbook, so I'm gonna look for it and make it here at home. It sounds, oh
Let
my
me
God, it
know how
sounds
you
so
like
good.
it.
I so will. I so will. In prepping for today's episode, I did a little bit of digging and I came across a
Oh gosh.
gorgeous, very short video of you. I was like, oh my God, this is so cool on YouTube called My Life as a Digital Nomad and Freelance Writer in Lisbon, Portugal. And in the video, you mentioned how your mom passed on to you the power that you possess. So, can you talk a little bit about that? And then, what is that power, and where do you see it going in the next phase of your life?
Thank you. I want to say to my friend Jean Pasquet, she's also the photographer for the Expat Kitchen. She's the one who produced that video. She's like amazing, love that girl.
Wow.
So super grateful again for just the incredibly talented individuals who live here in Lisbon that I've had a chance to meet. Um, so that video is really important to me because when I was growing up, my mom would always say like, remember the power you possess, and like as a
Mhm.
15-year-old, you're just like, "Ugh, what does that even mean?" It's like, but now that I'm older, I really do understand and appreciate it because, again, like I had mentioned, imposter syndrome is a real thing, and
Yes.
um, rejection is also a real thing. So sometimes that can really knock me off my feet, in terms of my confidence, and so I've really had to remind myself, the talents that I have. And I find that I go back to that mantra like often. And she would say, you have to remember the power that you possess, and
Mm.
and we all have that. And um, so that really that mantra is pretty much a mindset that I have to put on like every day,
Mhm.
because that helps me to push past like whatever self doubt or any sort of negative self talk that I might, experience. So I tell people it's like, shoot your shot, or like send that cold email, or apply for that fellowship. Like you really, the worst that could happen is that somebody says no, and then you have another opportunity, to go at it again.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, so I always just like have to remind myself like, this life is really rich and you really have to take advantage of it. Um, so
Yeah.
so yeah, that's that's a really important quote for me. And, that's how I really am going to continue with the next sort of projects and the next phase of my life. And I really want to be able to bring, my Boston community of family, friends, and creatives really to visit Portugal when things can really open
Oh,
up again, and like see it as I see it, so that they can, experience it too. Like, it's such a unique time to be in Portugal right now.
nice.
Yeah.
So cool. And there, speaking of shooting your shot, there's so many authors, I'm not going to list them here, that I would love to invite to Black Writers Read. And people are like,
Yeah.
just email them. I'm like, I don't know them. Just email them. And I'm
It's
like, I'm going to shoot my shot.
and like honestly, I'm still really grateful and honored that you were like, hey, I'd like to feature you. And I was like, really, Mean? Are you sure? Because I don't
Oh,
know. So I really appreciate the work that you're doing, through Black Writers Read. Like, it's so important, and it's affirming.
oh, thank you. I want it to become the next version of Reading Rainbow, where we
Yes.
create this platform where we
You're doing it.
embrace, yeah, and honor specifically Black authors and Black writers. So
It's
speaking,
so necessary.
yeah. So speaking of that, we're about to wrap up with our last question. What is next for you, Margo, and how can the Black Writers Read community support you in your work?
Yes. What's next is I'll be continuing promoting the Expat Kitchen. I'm also going to begin working on my second book. It's going to be a collection of
Mm.
essays, and basically would love to just get more support and share more of that project in the new year. So I've been sort of mulling over this idea of this book of essays. A
Mhm.
friend of mine who's based in Boston, she had recommended this food writing book. It's called You and I Eat the Same. And that is a collection
Mm.
of essays from different chefs all over the world. And they talk about, how every culture has like a pizza dish or a rice dish or taco dish or something like that. And I thought that was such a fascinating way to document just the diverse food scene in the world. And I would
Wow.
love to be able to have my next project not focus on food specifically, but what what brought the different expats to Portugal. So it would be focused on that.
Mhm.
So yeah, so working on getting a few expats together to contribute to this sort of collection of essays of sorts.
Nice. That's so awesome. And now we're ready to open the floor to our viewers for Q&A. So those
Okay,
who are
cool.
yeah, those who are joining us from Facebook or YouTube, please feel free to use your respective comment sections to type in questions for Margo. I'll give like a couple of seconds to give people an opportunity to put their questions together and all that stuff. So as they do that, given the time difference, what else do you have planned this evening?
So I am gonna put my groceries up. Somebody's got to do it. This adulting stuff. I'm like, uh. Anyways, so I'll be doing that, and then I'm gonna get ready to. I'll be doing like a virtual cooking class later this month, and it'll be my first virtual cooking class. I'm really excited about it, and it'll be a vegan dish. So I
Ooh,
tested it out on a few friends, and they actually liked it. So I'm really grateful because I don't tend to. I'll cook vegan, but like just for myself.
yeah.
So I'm really excited to prep for that. And that's pretty much it. Oh, and then I got to write that article I was talking about earlier.
Yes, the one that we talked about before we started.
Yeah. So that's
Yes.
it.
We do have a question. It's Opal, who is a
Oh, hey.
member of Valley Society and the person that introduced me to Margo.
Oh, thank you,
So,
Opal.
yes, so there's a couple of questions coming in. So, Opal's question is, have you ventured out into the dating pool? And if so, do you care to share your experiences? And if
uh,
you would ever
so
write about
yeah,
it.
that's okay. You guys are giving me some great pitch ideas. I have not ventured into the dating scene, but I have a couple friends who have, and one friend who's actually working on a podcast. She's a podcast producer. Her name is
Mm,
Hilote Gitana, and she is a fantastic podcaster, and she's been going on dates and talks about them like regularly. Check her out
mm,
on Instagram. And then there's another expat who's here. Her name is Heather. I think it's Heather's Amazing Journey is her IG name. And she's
Cool.
also like, I love watching her stories. So she's got all the, like, those two expats have like all the scoop on the dating scene here. But no, I'm not in the dating. I have not ventured.
Because I think we'll
Thanks
get
for
a
the questionable.
yeah, because I think we'll get a whole other Margo and writing once you start the dating scene.
Right, exactly. Sure.
And then the next question from Julia Brown. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey,
Margo,
Julia.
how do you deal with food, produce, ingredients, substitutes, and are your recipes created from only what's available? Oh, that's a really good question.
That is a very good question. So I will say the produce here, there are a lot of farms, so everything that I tend to purchase at the farmers markets, like they're sourced and made here in Portugal. I did just find out that there is like a shop that caters to the American, like, I don't know, things like Jiffy or I don't know, fluff like marshmallows or whatever, that are like
Oh.
particular to like brand US brands that you can't
Mhm.
find at like the grocery store here in Portugal. I think it's called something Liberty, the Liberty store. I'm not sure, but you can get, gummy bears and stuff like that, and grits and just different
Oh.
staples. Like I think you can get Lowry's seasoning. So
Yes!
I've not been to that store, but I did have a friend bring a like 5 pound bag of grits because I didn't know that store existed, and I'm so glad that she brought that giant thing of grits
Yeah!
for me, which is like hilarious. I'm like, the one time like I leave the country and I'm craving grits. So, anyways, I still have that big old thing of grits. Um,
Yes!
but I would say like before I found out that there was this Liberty store, I would just have to try to find the closest ingredient or spice. So there is a
Mhm.
large Southeast Asian community here. So yeah, there's also an African community here. So there's a Chinese market, there's the Indian market, the African markets. So whenever I need like green plantains or what's it, yuca, those sort of root vegetables that are, particular to Haitian cuisine, I'll go to those markets. Specifically when I'm hosting my private dinners, I have to go to those markets to get like the Scotch bonnet pepper. And I remember this one time I was like trying to make fried chicken and I couldn't find buttermilk anywhere. So then I was
Oh,
on YouTube and I had to
wow.
like I learned how to make buttermilk myself, which basically is just regular milk and vinegar. So apple cider vinegar.
Oh.
And I was like so impressed. I'm like, this is amazing. So there are certain things like I've really had to improvise and learn how to, you know, make do. But it's been
Wow.
a really nice experience otherwise.
Cool. And then Stephanie from Startup Writers Guild, which Valley Society is a part of, has a question as well. Do you have any delicious recipes for using grits other than for cereal? Mm.
Ah, okay. That's a good question. I love shrimp and grits, so
Oh,
I've never made
yes.
it though. I've only just had grits like for breakfast, but I'm sure you can make it more savory. So I would probably try experimenting with my soy salmon dish, and
Oh,
subbing out the coconut rice with the grits. So you could try that. That would be really good, I think.
that sounds so good. Which the question that's coming from my African American self. I don't know if you've ever gotten this question. Speaking of grits, I hope you know where I'm going with
I'm
this.
worried. I'm worried.
Yes.
Oh, please don't kick me out of this meeting because I feel like I
Ah!
know what question you're about to
You
ask
know what
me.
question I'm about to ask. Sugar or salt?
The last interview I did before we started, the interviewer was like, "We got to get this settled now." I was like, "Oh my goodness!"
Yes.
So I'm going on record. I do not put sugar on my grits.
Yes, the diaspora. We're good. Yes.
It was like you. It was so funny because he literally let out a big sigh. I was like, "Oh my!" I'm like, "Were you gonna hang up on me?" Like it was
Were you
so
gonna
funny.
hang up?
It was hilarious. So I'm glad I've been able to redeem myself twice.
Yes. No, because growing up, because I'm from a very like American Southern family on both sides of the family, and
Uh-huh.
growing up we had sugar. Yes, please
Mm.
don't take my card, people. And I got older and I was someplace and they put salt in it, and I was like, oh yes. And so I like it now more
Mhm.
savory. Like there's a restaurant
Okay.
in Springfield, Mass, about to shout out Dewey's Lounge, which makes an
Mhm.
amazing shrimp and grits for their
Really?
yes, for their
Oh,
brunch on
all right.
Sunday.
There's some really good food out like in Western Mass.
We
I didn't
do.
realize that. Like Worcester, yeah. Lowell
Yes!
area. Oh, wait till I'm backstage side. It's gonna be just like an eating tour. Like I gotta go to DC, I gotta go to New York, I'll be in Boston. Yeah, it's gonna be a good time.
Yes, yeah, because there's some Western Mass. I can definitely say we have some great wineries out here.
Mhm.
We
Mhm.
have amazing, amazing brunch places out here. We
Yeah.
also have like I'm a huge coffee connoisseur, so much so we had it as a
Mm,
theme in our wedding. There's some
nice.
great coffee shops out here that make their own. Like for example, I really want to give a shout out to like Monsoon Roastery, who has been a huge
Mm.
supporter of my work. You can order. I don't know if they ship abroad, but you can
I'll just have
order.
something shipped to my sister's house.
Yeah, yeah, she can ship it to you. They have. Oh
Yeah.
my god, their coffee is really good.
Oh, cool. I'll have to check them out. Okay.
Yeah. And then we have two more questions from Julia. And this is great because we get to shout out, again, another person for people to follow. Can you repeat the name of the first woman you named regarding, what was it, the dating podcast, I think it was?
Yes. Can I type in the chat?
Yes,
And oh,
please.
okay. All right, I'll do that so people can see.
Yeah,
Let's see. Okay, okay, let me get her name spelled proper. Okay.
cool. Yeah, thank you for putting it in the comments. And
Yeah,
then
no problem.
Opal, we're going to close out with Opal's question, which is amazing. It's an amazing question, and I bet there's a lot of differences amongst the diaspora and how people show up. Could you
Hmm.
please elaborate on privilege and imposter syndrome as a Caribbean American expat in Portugal?
Okay. Um, repeat the question. I'm sorry.
Yes. Could you please elaborate on privilege and imposter syndrome, which is two things, but I think they can operate one and the same, as a Caribbean American expat in Portugal?
Sure. Um, so in terms of the privilege, I'll say from my conversations with a lot of the members of the diaspora who are from former colonies, so that includes Angola, Brazil, Sao Tome, Cape Verde,
Mm,
Mozambique, Guinea-Bissau. Um, their experience is so different from mine because they'll say, maybe they'll be spoken down to um,
mm,
based off of the way they look or maybe the way they speak Portuguese. I, because I don't know the language, it all sounds the same to me, unfortunately.
mhm,
So there's definitely like a lot of my Brazilian friends will say, yeah, somebody was following me in the grocery store because they
mm,
thought I was going to take something. Um, that's not happened to me. And I think it's
mm,
because I'm an American and I go in there speaking English. I don't speak the language here. So in that sense, I'll say like that's sort of the privilege that I'm talking about. Um, and yeah, I don't know if I answered like the question fully, but
yeah.
I'll say that like I'm hyper aware of my privilege and I don't want to make it seem like it's like all like peachy, for
Mm,
everybody in Portugal because it's not. Like they definitely um, have a lot to they have a lot of progress that they need to make across the board and in terms of like addressing what a microaggression is or
mm,
um, you know why the why there aren't a lot of people that maybe look like me, in the media or in different industries.
Mhm.
When you're on the ground, like it's an incredibly diverse space, but you don't see that reflected in the newspaper perhaps or
Mhm.
in a television show. So those, like when I say privilege, class privilege, like that's what I mean. Like, yeah. So it's a very delicate thing, and like, I want to be able to integrate into the culture by supporting, the marginalized communities, whether that's hosting a book drive or, visiting
Mhm.
communities where maybe don't, they rarely see someone that looks like me in this particular career, you know what I mean? Or hosting mentoring sessions with like the um, young people here. So those are some of the things that I'm like thinking about as an expat that I would love to be able to really implement next year with the growing expat community that's here.
Hmm. Nice. That is amazing. Oh my gosh, this was such a great conversation. So thank
Thank
you,
you.
Margo, so much for
Thank
joining
you. Thank
us.
you. Thank you for
Yeah,
having
today.
me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and spending some time with us this Saturday. So everyone, please be sure to purchase. It's available as a digital copy. The Expat Kitchen, which is available at www.theexpatkitchen.com. So thank you all so much for joining us today. If you want to learn more about my work, because I do a lot of things besides Black Writers Read, my website is just NicoleMYoung.com. So thank you all for joining us today and for making Black authors matter.